She stood at the edge of the room, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead blending with the low shuffle of papers, boots, and hushed conversations. Why was no one looking at her? Why did their eyes pass over her like she was a shadow? The briefing table was crowded, maps spread wide, red lines drawn across deserts and mountains she knew better than most. Men leaned in, pointing, murmuring. She heard every word, every doubt, every certainty. But not once did they ask her. She kept her hands folded, her nails pressing into her palm beneath the sleeve of her uniform. She could have spoken. She could have told them where the lines were wrong. How the mountain pass they thought secure was nothing more than a graveyard waiting to be filled. But she stayed silent. Because silence was safer. No one in this room knew the truth she carried. The reason her voice cracked when she spoke about maps. The reason her gaze faltered when they spoke about acceptable losses. Losses were not acceptable to her. Not anymore. A chair scraped back. The commander's voice cut through the static. Orders were given, positions assigned. She was not called, not once. And yet she knew she would be there. The hum in her chest told her so. That same hum she felt years ago, the day she first stepped into the cockpit of a helicopter, her heart beating faster than the blades above her head. The hum that carried through every mission, every firefight, every silent watch through a sniper's scope. That hum never lied. Someone brushed past her, the scent of tobacco and sweat clinging to his jacket. He muttered without looking, "Don't get in the way." Her jaw clenched. She looked down at her boots, polished but scuffed from gravel roads and long nights. In the leather she saw the faint reflection of her face, tired, hollow-eyed, but still there, still standing. She remembered her father's words, not spoken in pride but in warning. "The silence of war will follow you home. Don't think it won't." She hadn't believed him. She thought resilience was louder, brighter. But silence did follow her. It lived in the corners of every room she entered. Tonight it was alive again. The mission briefing ended. Men scattered like chess pieces set into motion. Radios clipped, rifles checked, helmets adjusted. She stood where she was, watching, waiting until the room emptied and the echo of boots faded into distance. Only then did she move. Her hand brushed over the map left behind, fingertips tracing the route like a lover's skin. Her lips parted, a whisper escaping before she could stop it. "They don't see it, but I do." A sound distant, faint, boots in the corridor. She pulled her hand away as if burned, straightened, forced her face into neutrality. The door opened. A young private stepped in, no more than 20. Eyes too wide, carrying the look of someone not yet hardened, not yet broken. He saw her and froze, uncertain. "You're supposed to be." "I know where I'm supposed to be." Her voice was quiet but not harsh. He nodded quickly, nervous, then hesitated. "Do you ever get used to it, the silence, after briefings, after they leave?" She studied him. His question cut deeper than he knew. She wanted to tell him no, that silence was a weight you carried forever, that it dug into your chest and never let go. But she couldn't. Not to him, not yet. Instead, she softened her tone. "You don't get used to it. You learn to move with it." He swallowed hard, nodded again, and left without another word. When the door clicked shut, she let out the breath she'd been holding. She gathered her pack, checked the sidearm she always carried, the weight of it grounding her, and then she walked, not toward the barracks, not toward rest, but toward the motor pool. The night air was sharp, dust rising under the floodlights as engines rumbled awake. Soldiers loaded gear, some laughing too loudly, their nerves bleeding through forced humor. Others smoked in silence. She walked past them all, head low, steps steady. A mechanic noticed her, brow furrowing. "Ma'am, you're not." She cut him a glance. Not hostile, not pleading, just certain. He swallowed, said nothing more, and went back to his work. At the far end of the lot, the vehicle waited. She climbed in, adjusting straps, her fingers shaking just once before stilling. The convoy began to roll out. And she was there, hidden in plain sight, a shadow among them. The desert stretched wide under moonlight, jagged rocks casting sharp silhouettes across the sand. Engines roared, headlights cutting tunnels through darkness. But inside she felt the hum again, steady, alive, inevitable. Every bump in the road brought her back to another night, years before. A night when she was younger, still filled with belief that every mission had meaning, every sacrifice a purpose. A night when she held someone's hand in the back of a different vehicle, telling him they'd both make it out. He hadn't. The convoy slowed, radios crackled, words were exchanged, clipped, urgent. She felt it before she saw it that something wasn't right. The air was too still, the silence too loud. She adjusted her rifle, eyes scanning the ridges. And then she saw it. A flicker of movement where none should be. Her chest tightened, her breath hitched. But no one else noticed, not yet. She leaned forward, ready to speak into the comms, and stopped. Would they listen? Would they even hear her? The memory of the briefing room pressed in, the silence, the dismissal, the weight of being unseen. Her finger tapped the radio, once, twice, then held. She spoke, "Convoy, hold position." No answer. She pressed again, harder, "Hold position." A voice came back, irritated, "Who the hell?" The rest was cut off by the first explosion. Heat, light, shrapnel tearing through the night. Screams. The vehicle ahead was gone, consumed by fire. And just like that, the silence was broken. The blast lit up the desert like daylight, fire tearing the night apart. Shards of metal screamed across the sand, clanging against armor, ripping into flesh. She ducked instinctively, heat burning across her cheek, smoke filling her lungs. Voices roared in her headset, commands, curses, pleas. She pulled herself up, throat raw, ears ringing. The convoy had broken, men scrambling out of vehicles, some dragging the wounded, others firing into shadows that seemed alive with movement. But she wasn't firing, not yet. She was listening. Through the chaos, the silence spoke louder than the noise. She could hear the absence, the careful calculation of an enemy who had waited for this exact moment. This wasn't chance. It was design. Her eyes cut to the ridge, the same flicker she'd noticed before, now clearer, a figure against the moonlight disappearing just as quickly. She raised her rifle, scope aligning, breath steady. One heartbeat, two. She fired. The crack split the air, echoing through the canyon. A body fell, tumbling down rocks into darkness. For a brief second, the incoming fire faltered, enough for the convoy to regroup. A voice shouted in her ear, panicked but firm. Who the hell was that shot? She didn't answer, she just reloaded. Another explosion thundered to her left, an RPG striking the ground short of its target, sand erupting like a wave. She dropped behind cover, coughing, blinking through grit. Her lungs burned, her chest ached, but the hum inside her, it stayed steady. She thought of her brother then, younger, reckless, the one who never came home, his name etched on a memorial wall thousands of miles away. She had never visited, couldn't, because the silence would follow her there too. Another scream jolted her back. She crawled forward, dragging herself to a soldier pinned beneath debris. His leg was twisted, blood seeping through torn fabric. His eyes were wide, glassy, teeth clenched against a cry. "Stay with me," she whispered, gripping the metal, straining. Her muscles shook, veins bulging. With a desperate heave, she shifted the wreckage enough to free him. He gasped, half a sob, half a laugh. "Thought I was done," he croaked. "Not tonight." She hauled him toward cover, bullets ricocheting off stone nearby. Dust fell around them like rain. For a moment their eyes met, his filled with fear and gratitude, hers with something harder to name, a mix of defiance and sorrow. Then another order cut through comms. Pull back, fall to secondary position. The convoy began to retreat, dragging wounded, firing suppressive bursts into the ridges. Engines roared alive again, headlights jerking across rock and sand. She lifted her rifle once more, covering the movement. Every shot she fired was deliberate, precise. Each trigger pull was a choice. A life ended so another might live. And each one weighed on her. When the last vehicle began to pull back, she ran. Sand pounded beneath her boots, lungs burning, chest heaving. She leapt onto the side of the final truck, hands gripping tight as it accelerated, bouncing violently across uneven ground. The flames behind them grew smaller, swallowed by the night, but the screams, those stayed, echoing, lingering. She sat in the open hatch, wind tearing at her face, smoke stinging her eyes. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, surprised at the streak of blood. She didn't know if it was hers, didn't care. The young private from earlier, the one who'd asked her about silence, was across from her in the truck, clutching his rifle too tightly. His knuckles were white, lips trembling. His helmet sat crooked on his head. He looked at her like she was someone else now, not the woman ignored in the briefing, not the shadow, but something sharper. You saw it coming, didn't you?" he stammered. She didn't answer, because the truth hurt too much. The convoy rattled on until they reached a fallback site, a rocky outcrop half-sheltered from view. Engines cut. Men spilled out, some collapsing from exhaustion, others kneeling beside the wounded. Medics scrambled, barking orders. The air reeked of cordite, diesel, and blood. She slid out of the truck, legs stiff, head heavy. Around her, the aftermath unfolded, the frantic, messy ballet of survival. And then the commander's voice, sharp, accusing. "You," he stormed toward her, face red beneath grime and sweat. "You gave that call, you broke protocol. Who authorized you?" She held his gaze, unflinching. "You'd all be dead if I hadn't." The circle of soldiers went quiet, eyes shifted between them. The commander's jaw clenched, his breath ragged. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he spat to the side, turning away. "Get her out of my sight." She didn't move. Instead, she looked at the men around her, their exhaustion, their fear, their relief at still being alive. Some nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly. Not approval, not yet, but recognition. She turned, walking away from the cluster, finding a patch of stone where the shadows offered solitude. She sat, rifle across her knees, eyes on the horizon. The desert was still again, quiet. But inside her, the silence roared. She closed her eyes, hearing the echoes of the explosion, the screams, the single shot she fired that had turned the tide. Her chest tightened, not from smoke now, but from the weight of choice. Because each choice followed her, into sleep, into silence, into the places where no one else could go. The private's voice broke her reverie, soft, tentative. "Ma'am." She opened her eyes. He stood a few feet away, helmet now off, sweat-matted hair clinging to his forehead. He looked young again, too young. "Why didn't you tell them, back in the briefing? Why didn't you make them listen?" Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him the truth. That sometimes the loudest room still refuses to hear. That sometimes silence isn't chosen, it's forced. Instead, she just said, because some things they wouldn't believe until they see it burn. His lips parted, as if to respond, but no words came. He nodded slowly and walked away. She was left alone again. The wind picked up, whistling through the rocks, carrying the faint smell of smoke from miles away. She tilted her head back, staring at the stars overhead, bright, indifferent, eternal. And she wondered, how many more choices would she have to make? How many more silences would she carry? The hum inside her didn't answer. It only stayed. Why did she always end up here? On the edge of the circle, in the shadows, where no one called her name. The wounded moaned in the background. Medics worked under headlamps, their hands red, voices low but urgent. Beyond them, the rest of the convoy had settled into uneasy silence, some sharpening blades, some staring blankly at the ground, others whispering prayers they'd never admit to saying. She stayed apart, not because she wanted to, but because it was easier. The stars above seemed closer tonight, sharp against the black sky. A desert has a way of doing that, stripping away everything but the essentials: sky, earth, silence. Her fingers traced the grooves of her rifle absent-mindedly, each line familiar, worn from years of use. She had carried it longer than she had carried some friendships. It was steady, unchanging, unlike people, unlike trust. A crunch of gravel pulled her from thought. The young private again. Helmet tucked under his arm, lips pressed into a line. He hesitated a few feet away, as if crossing some invisible boundary. "Permission to sit?" he asked almost sheepishly. She gave the slightest nod. He lowered himself to the ground beside her, exhaling as though the weight of the night pressed directly onto his shoulders. For a while, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the wind weaving through the rocks. Finally, he broke the silence. "Was that your first time seeing something like that?" She turned her head slowly, studying him. He already knew the answer. "No," she said softly. His throat bobbed. He gave a short, nervous laugh. "Didn't think so." Silence stretched again. She thought maybe he'd leave it there. But then his voice returned, quieter now. "My dad, he told me before I shipped out. He said war changes people. That silence after battle, he said it never goes away." Her chest tightened. A shadow of memory swept over her. Her father's voice again. "The silence of war will follow you home. Don't think it won't." She swallowed, the words catching like sand in her throat. "Your father was right," she said. The private looked at her then, really looked, searching for something, maybe reassurance, maybe permission to admit he was afraid. She wanted to give it, but her own silence had been carved too deep. Instead, she asked, "Why did you come here?" He blinked. "What do you mean?" "Why this life? Why this fight?" He shifted, fingers picking at the dirt. "Because I didn't want to be invisible. Back home, I was just some kid no one noticed. Out here, I thought maybe I'd matter." Her heart thudded, too close, too familiar. Because once, long ago, she'd thought the same. She saw herself at 18, wide-eyed, too eager, believing the uniform would make her visible, believing it would give her a name, a weight, a purpose no one could deny. But the uniform had only made her a vessel for orders, for silence, for choices she didn't get to explain. The private's words still lingered when footsteps approached. The commander. His silhouette loomed, his voice sharp but lower now. "We'll move again at first light. Enemy won't stay dormant. Get what rest you can." She nodded once. No salute, no acknowledgement, just enough to say she heard. He lingered, his eyes narrowing as if weighing something unsaid. Then he left without another word. The private exhaled. "He doesn't like you." Her lips curved, the faintest trace of a smile. "He doesn't have to." The boy chuckled, shaking his head. "Wish I had that kind of confidence." She didn't correct him, didn't tell him it wasn't confidence. It was armor. Armor forged over years of being doubted, dismissed, ignored until the only shield left was indifference. Her gaze drifted back to the stars. And with them came memory. The helicopter's rotors thundering above, the smell of oil and dust, her brother's laughter in the headset, reckless and alive. Then the flash, the sound that wasn't sound but rupture, the weightless moment before the crash. And then silence. She had crawled from the wreckage with nothing but ringing ears and blood in her mouth. He hadn't crawled at all. She never forgave herself for walking away from that fire, for living when he didn't. The hum inside her began again, steady, low, inescapable. The private's voice pulled her back. "Do you think any of this means something?" She blinked, steadying her breath. "What do you mean?" "I mean we risk everything. For what? A hill, a road, a patch of dirt we'll leave in a week." His voice cracked. "Does it matter?" She studied him, and for a moment she wanted to give him hope, to tell him every action had meaning, that sacrifices built something greater, but the desert had taught her otherwise. Instead, she spoke the truth, quiet, honest. Sometimes it's not the ground we hold, it's the people beside us. He looked at her, eyes glassy. He nodded as if clinging to her words. But she wasn't finished. And sometimes it's just about surviving one more night, one more silence. The private didn't respond, but he stayed beside her until his head finally dropped, exhaustion pulling him under. She sat awake long after, watching the horizon. Somewhere out there in the ridges and shadows, the enemy waited. She knew they hadn't seen the last of them, knew tonight's ambush was just the beginning. But she also knew something else, something she hadn't told anyone. This mission, this desert, it wasn't random. It wasn't just another rotation. She had asked to be here. No one knew, not the commander, not the private, not anyone. Because somewhere in these hills, somewhere in the silence of this war, was the man responsible for her brother's death. And she wasn't leaving until she found him. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faintest sound, distant, almost imagined. A metallic clink against stone, too deliberate to be nature. Her eyes narrowed, her grip on the rifle tightened. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "They're closer than we think." And the silence answered back. What was that sound? It was faint, almost hidden under the night wind, metal against stone, a whisper of movement on the ridge. Most men wouldn't have heard it. Most men would have dismissed it as desert settling. But she knew better. The desert didn't shift like that. Her muscles tightened, breath slowing, ears straining for the smallest crack in silence. She touched the private's shoulder lightly, waking him without a word. His eyes shot open, instinct pulling him upright, hand gripping his rifle. She pressed a finger to her lips. He froze. For a long moment the night seemed still again, stars above, rocks around, the low groans of the wounded behind them. Then another sound, a slide of gravel closer now. Her pulse quickened, but her face remained stone. She motioned with 2 fingers, signaling the private to stay low. Then she shifted her rifle, scope glinting in the faint starlight, searching the ridge. Nothing, just black outlines of jagged stone. But she could feel it. The hum in her chest, that steady, low vibration that never lied. She slid forward silently, boots soft on sand, body close to the ground. The private followed a few feet behind, too nervous to breathe loud. Together they crept to a vantage point overlooking the slope. And there, barely visible, the silhouette of a man crouched near the rocks, something long and thin slung across his back. A weapon. Her finger brushed the trigger, heart pounding. One shot and it would be over. But she didn't fire, not yet. Because there was something in his posture, the way he lingered unmoving as if watching, waiting. Not an attacker, a scout, a messenger. Which meant more were coming. She pulled back, crawling down toward the outcrop. The private's breath trembled against her ear. "What did you see?" "Not alone," she whispered. He swallowed hard. His fear was thick enough to taste. She turned, eyes locking with his. "You don't fire unless you have to, understand?" He nodded quickly. By the time they reached the others, the camp had stirred. Some sensed it too, the weight in the air, the way silence seemed to press against the skin. Soldiers shifted uneasily, weapons ready but eyes darting. The commander strode forward, irritation sharp in his voice. "What the hell is this? Why's everyone up?" "They're coming," she said. He scowled. "You don't know that." But before she could answer, a shot cracked through the night. A bullet smacked into stone just inches from his head. The camp erupted. Shouts, scrambling, rifles spitting fire into the ridges above. Muzzle flashes lit the rocks, brief snapshots of shadowy figures darting between cover. The commander cursed, dragging men into formation. "Return fire, hold the line." She dropped to her belly, scope scanning, steadying her breathing. She counted movements, 3, 4, 5, maybe more. They were coordinated, patient. And they weren't just here to harass. They were here to break them. She fired once. A figure collapsed. She shifted, fired again. Another shadow fell. The private beside her tried to steady his aim, hands shaking. His first burst went wide, sparks kicking off stone. He cursed under his breath, frustration boiling. "Slow down," she hissed. "Breathe, one shot at a time." He swallowed, tried again. This time his round found its mark. The body tumbled, silent. For a moment she saw it in his eyes, the horror of that first kill, the realization that training targets never bled. He froze, chest heaving. She wanted to tell him it would haunt him, that the silence afterward would be louder than the gunfire. But this wasn't the moment. Survival came first. More fire rained down from the ridge. Rocks shattered, fragments slicing skin. A man screamed as a round tore into his shoulder. Medics dragged him back. The commander barked orders, voice hoarse, but his words blurred into the chaos. She tuned him out, tuned everything out. It was just her, the rifle, the silence. One shot, another, another. And then a flash of memory. Her brother's face in the cockpit, grinning under the headset, his voice cocky and fearless. Then the crash, the fire. She flinched, the shot breaking wide. Her breath hitched, hands shook. "Not now, not here." The private's voice cut through. "They're pushing left." She blinked, forcing herself back, scope shifting. He was right, 3 figures slipping lower, circling toward the convoy's flank. If they broke through there, it would unravel everything. She moved without thinking, sprinting low across the sand, bullets whipping past her ears. She slid into position, rifle braced. 3 targets. She took 2 quickly, the third diving into cover. She adjusted, waiting. Seconds dragged like hours. The hum in her chest built, relentless. Then the third man rose, weapon raised. She fired. Silence. The ridge fell quiet at last, a long, aching quiet. Smoke drifted across the camp, the acrid stench of gunpowder mixed with sweat and blood. The soldiers slowly lowered their weapons, breaths ragged, faces pale in the moonlight. The commander paced, shouting for ammo counts, casualty reports. His words were background noise. She stayed kneeling, rifle slack in her hands, staring at the ridge, at the place where shadows had vanished into silence again. The private staggered beside her, chest heaving. His face was pale, eyes wide, hands trembling. "I killed him," he whispered, his voice cracked. "God, I killed him." She looked at him, her throat tightening. She wanted to tell him it was necessary, that it saved lives, but she remembered her first kill, the weight that never left. So instead she placed a hand on his shoulder. Not words, just presence. He swallowed hard, blinking fast, then nodded. For the rest of the night the camp stayed on edge. Men jumped at every sound, every gust of wind against rock, but no more shots came, no more figures appeared. When dawn finally touched the horizon, painting the sky in pale orange, she sat alone again, watching the light crawl across the desert. And with it came the memory she could never outrun. The crash site, the smell of burning fuel, the silence after her brother's laughter was gone forever. She clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. Somewhere out there, the man who orchestrated that attack still lived. And every battle, every silence, every choice brought her closer to him. The sun rose higher, the desert stretched endless before them. And she whispered to herself, voice barely audible under the wind, "I won't leave until it's done." How do you measure the cost of one night? When dawn came, it carried silence heavy enough to crush the air. Men moved slowly, like ghosts among the rocks. Some packed gear with mechanical precision. Others stared blankly at nothing, their eyes caught in places only they could see. She walked through them, her steps quiet, measured. The ground was stained, marked by blood darkening the sand. Spent casings glittered in the new light, scattered like bones. Everywhere silence. But inside, the hum in her chest kept beating, steady, relentless. The commander stood apart, radio pressed to his ear, voice clipped, impatient. She caught fragments: higher command, demands for status, pressure for movement. No mention of the men who had bled on the rocks, just maps, just lines. Her jaw clenched, she turned away. At the far edge of camp, the young private sat alone, helmet off, head in his hands. His rifle lay across his knees, untouched. She approached slowly, crouching beside him. He didn't look up, his voice was raw, almost breaking. "I can still see his face, the one I shot, I can't stop seeing it." She studied him, remembering her own first time. The shaking hands, the dry mouth, the way the world tilted because nothing would ever be the same again. She spoke quietly. "It doesn't go away, not completely." His shoulders hunched tighter, as if bracing against her words. "Then how do you live with it?" She hesitated, her throat tightened. The honest answer was simple: you don't, you carry it. Every silence, every night, every shadow. But she couldn't tell him that, not yet. So she said, "You keep moving. You remember who's beside you, and you fight to see another sunrise." He finally looked at her, his eyes red, searching. Not for answers, for survival. She gave him the only thing she had left, a steady gaze that didn't flinch. A shout broke the fragile moment. "The commander, we're moving out." The camp stirred, reluctant but obedient. Packs strapped, rifles checked, engines rumbling. The wounded loaded carefully, though their groans betrayed how little comfort could be found in the hard seats of trucks. The convoy began its crawl once more, wheels grinding over stone, engines groaning under the weight of silence. She sat in the back, rifle across her lap, eyes scanning the horizon. The private was beside her, too tense to relax, his hands gripping his helmet as though it might anchor him. The desert stretched endless ahead, jagged ridges to the left, flat open sand to the right, too exposed, too quiet. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't trust quiet, not anymore. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, beating down mercilessly, baking the metal of the vehicles until it burned to touch. Sweat soaked her shirt, stung her eyes, but she didn't blink. Every sound was catalogued, every silence measured. She thought of her brother again, of how alive he had looked that last morning, laughing, teasing her for being too serious. Of how she had rolled her eyes, secretly grateful for his recklessness because it balanced her own weight. And then gone. Taken by someone she had never seen. Someone whose name had been whispered in reports, half confirmed in intelligence briefings, then buried under politics. But she remembered. She remembered the name, the face in a grainy photograph, the man who had set the ambush that killed her brother's crew. And that man operated in this desert. She hadn't told anyone, not command, not the men beside her. This mission for her wasn't just about maps or supply lines, it was personal. And she knew the silence would not let her leave until she found him. The convoy slowed, dust swirled, choking the air. The commander's voice came sharp. "Check the ridge, we'll halt here." The men dismounted, weapons raised, nerves stretched thin. She stepped onto the sand, scanning the horizon. The private moved close, whispering, "Do you think it's another ambush?" She didn't answer right away. The hum inside her was steady, heavier now, pressing into her ribs. "Yes," she said finally. And then it came. Not the sudden explosion of the night before, but a single shot, precise, deliberate. A man in the front dropped instantly, blood pooling dark in the dust. "Sniper!" The camp scattered for cover, shouts echoing, rifles spraying wildly at shadows. But she didn't dive. She stayed still, eyes narrowing, scanning. Because this wasn't chaos, this was calculation. She dropped to one knee, rifle braced, scope sweeping across the ridge. There, a flash of glass. Her breath slowed, one heartbeat, two. She fired. The scope glass shattered. A figure jerked back, tumbling behind rock. Silence again. But she knew better. One sniper never traveled alone. The commander barked, furious. Suppressive fire now. The ridge erupted with bullets, dust exploding from stone. The air shook with the roar of automatic fire. She ignored it, kept searching. Then she saw him. Not clearly, just a shape, a movement, but enough. Her chest tightened, her heart stuttered. Could it be? Her finger hovered on the trigger, but her hand shook. Because if it was him, the man she had hunted in silence for years, pulling the trigger meant ending the mission she had carried in her chest since her brother died. She froze. The private's voice hissed beside her, "Take it, take the shot." Her throat closed. The hum inside her roared, drowning everything else. And then the shape was gone. Her chest collapsed inward, a hollow ache spreading through her ribs. The private cursed, "You had him." Her eyes stayed locked on the ridge, unblinking. The truth was worse than missing. The truth was hesitation. Because vengeance wasn't simple, not when it meant silencing the only thread tying her to the memory of her brother. The fight dragged on for another hour before the enemy pulled back, vanishing into the desert as quickly as they'd come. The convoy regrouped, battered but intact. But she stayed apart, rifle still raised, staring at the ridge where the shadow had disappeared. The commander stormed toward her, voice sharp. "What the hell were you doing? You had a shot and you didn't take it." Her lips parted, but no words came. Because how could she explain that silence sometimes demanded more than fire, that some choices chained you tighter the longer you carried them? He shook his head, disgusted. "You'll answer for this." She said nothing. The private lingered after the commander left, his voice softer, pained. "Why didn't you fire?" Her hands trembled, hidden in her lap. Her eyes stayed fixed on the ridge. And finally, her voice broke the silence. "Because sometimes, the ghost you're chasing is the only thing keeping you alive." The private's face fell, confusion and sorrow mixing. He didn't understand, not yet. But one day he would. The sun blazed overhead. The desert stretched endless. And she knew the silence would not let her rest, not until she faced the ghost directly. What happens when silence begins to turn against you? The desert stretched for miles, but the distance between her and the others felt wider than any horizon. She could feel it in the glances, short, sharp, questioning. When they set camp that night, no one spoke near her. Men huddled in small circles, their voices low, their eyes flicking in her direction before quickly turning away. The commander didn't bother with subtlety. His words cut like stone. She hesitated. Men died because of it. She didn't defend herself. She sat apart, back against the cold steel of a truck, rifle resting across her knees. The silence was her shield, but even a shield grows heavy when you hold it too long. The private approached cautiously, shifting from foot to foot. His face carried the same uncertainty she'd seen before, torn between respect and doubt. He sat down beside her without asking, shoulders hunched. For a long moment, neither spoke. The desert wind whispered across the sand, dragging grains against metal. Finally, he said, almost in a whisper, "You knew him, didn't you? The one on the ridge." Her chest tightened. She didn't answer right away. The silence stretched thin, vibrating like a wire pulled too tight. "Yes," she said at last. The private's head snapped toward her. His eyes searched her face, wide with disbelief. "Then why didn't you?" She cut him off with a shake of her head. "Because some things, some choices, they don't end with a bullet." The words landed heavy, but hollow. Even she wasn't sure if she believed them. He stared at her, confusion etched deep, but he didn't press further, not that night. The commander did, though. Later, he found her near the edge of camp, where she had been tracing the horizon with her scope, searching shadows. His voice was sharp, low, meant only for her. "You're compromised. Whatever this is, personal obsession, I don't care. You put this unit at risk again and I'll see you pulled off this mission. Permanently. Her jaw locked. She wanted to spit the truth at him, tell him why she had come, why she couldn't let go. But what would that change? To him, her brother was just another casualty, another name on a list. So she stayed silent. The commander sneered. That's what I thought. He turned, leaving her in the dark with only her hum steady gnawing. The next day brought more distance, not just miles but trust unraveling. The men moved differently around her now. Some avoided her completely, as though her silence carried infection. Others glared openly, bitterness carved in their faces. Only the private stayed close, but even he carried doubt in the tightness of his shoulders, the hesitance in his voice. The desert grew harsher as they pushed deeper, less cover, less water, less patience. Supplies ran thin, tempers ran shorter. At night, men muttered about command not knowing what they were doing, about being led into traps, about dying out here with no one remembering their names. She listened, silent, but inside the words dug deep, because she knew what it meant to be forgotten, to have a brother's death swept under reports, lost to shifting priorities. And still she hunted. Every ridge, every shadow she searched. The ghost she carried had a face now, a scarred cheek, cold eyes, the man who had taken her brother's laugh from the world. She had seen him, she was certain, and certainty was dangerous. The moment finally came at dusk. They were moving through a narrow pass, stone walls rising high on either side, shadows deepening. She walked near the rear, scanning upward. Then she froze. There, a figure, half hidden against the rock, moving with care, too careful for a wanderer, too sharp for coincidence. Her breath caught, the hum inside her roared. It was him. She raised her rifle, finger brushing the trigger. But a shout ripped the moment apart. Contact, left side. The pass erupted in gunfire. Bullets sparked off stone. Men scattered for cover, shouting, firing blindly into shadows. The figure vanished into the chaos. Her chest collapsed inward, rage and grief colliding in a storm she couldn't release. She moved with the fight, firing where she had to, covering men who stumbled, dragging one wounded to cover. Her body obeyed the mission, but her eyes searched only for the ghost. Hours passed before the enemy melted back into the desert, leaving only echoes and blood. The unit counted losses, 2 men dead, 3 wounded, faces she had seen laugh only nights before now silent, eyes staring into nothing. The commander's anger turned to her again. Where were you? You saw something, you hesitated again. Her voice broke, low but sharp. I had him. The commander stepped closer, fury in his eyes. Had who? She stared at him, throat tight, words caught. She could feel the private's eyes on her too, waiting, hoping she would explain. But silence wrapped around her like chains. The commander's face hardened. You're finished. When we get back, you're done. He walked away, leaving the words heavy as stone. She sat down hard against the rock, chest heaving. The private knelt beside her, desperate. You have to tell me, who is he? Why are you doing this? Her hands trembled against her rifle. Her throat burned with words she had buried for too long. And finally, she let them out. My brother, he was out here. Same ridges, same sand. His convoy was ambushed. They all died. And the man who led it, the one I just saw, he's still out here. The private's face went pale, understanding dawning like a storm. That's why you came, he whispered. She nodded once, her voice breaking. That's why I can't let go. The silence that followed was heavier than gunfire. The private swallowed hard. Then, if you get the chance again, will you take it? Her eyes closed. She saw her brother's smile, heard his laugh, felt the weight of years of silence pressing her chest. And when she opened them again, her voice was raw, certain. Yes. But deep inside, she knew the truth was not that simple. Because vengeance never ends with a single shot. The desert wind rose, carrying sand like whispers. Around her, the men carried their grief in silence. The commander plotted the next march. And she waited, because she knew the silence wasn't done with her. Not yet. How long can you carry silence before it consumes you? The desert had grown colder, harsher. Each night felt sharper against the skin, each mile heavier on the bones. They were running low on water, low on patience, low on faith. The men spoke less. When they did, it was with bitterness, questions whispered into the dark. Why are we still here? What are we chasing? Who's next? She listened, always, but her mind wasn't on their questions. Her eyes kept drifting to the ridges, to the shadows, to him. The commander's distrust had hardened into hostility. He barely looked at her now, except to remind her of her failures. "Stay out of my way," he snapped one morning, before leading the men forward. She didn't argue. She didn't need his approval anymore. Her mission wasn't his mission. But the private stayed by her side. He was quieter now, changed by loss. His face had hardened, the lines of youth fading under the weight of what he'd seen. But his eyes still searched hers, looking for something to hold on to. One night, as they sat at the edge of camp, he finally spoke. "If you find him, what then?" She didn't answer immediately. The fire cracked between them, sparks drifting into the dark. Her voice was low when it came. "Then the silence ends." The private frowned. "Or it begins again." Her chest tightened. Because he was right, she knew it, but knowing didn't stop the fire inside. The desert gave no answers, only more miles. Then, as if summoned by her obsession, it happened. Dawn, a ridge ahead, shadows moving, too deliberate, too precise. The commander barked orders, men fanning out, weapons raised. But before the ambush even began, she felt it, that hum in her chest. Louder now, almost deafening. He was there. The first shots cracked the air. Men dropped to the ground, rifles blazing at the ridges. Dust and smoke swallowed the world. She didn't hesitate this time. She moved forward, low and fast, ignoring the shouts behind her. The private called after her, voice panicked, but she didn't stop. Every beat of her heart screamed one thing: find him. Bullets chipped stone, hissed past her ears. Shouts echoed, but she pressed on, weaving through the chaos. And then she saw him. Clearer than before. The scar, the eyes, the face she had carried in silence all these years. He was aiming down at the convoy, calm, methodical. Her rifle rose. Her breath caught. This was it. Her finger tightened, but a burst of gunfire ripped the ground near her feet, forcing her to dive for cover. She hit the sand hard, lungs burning. Her rifle clattered, but she clutched it back, rolling against the rock. When she looked again, he was gone. Her chest collapsed inward. Fury burned, wild and desperate. She scrambled forward, chasing shadows up the ridge, ignoring the chaos below. Every step felt like defiance, every breath like betrayal to the men still fighting. The private's voice rang out behind her, ragged. "Wait, don't go alone." But she didn't stop. At the top of the ridge, she found him. Not in the scope, not in shadows, but standing there, rifle in hand, watching her with eyes cold as stone. For a moment the world fell silent. The battle below faded. The desert wind held its breath. It was just the two of them. She raised her rifle. He didn't flinch. His voice was low, rough. "You're his sister." Her blood froze. He knew. He tilted his head, almost curious. He begged, you know, not for himself, for you. Her hands trembled on the rifle. Lies, they had to be lies. But what if they were? Her throat tightened. "You killed him." He shrugged. "War kills. I just happened to be the one holding the trigger." Her vision blurred with rage. The rifle felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She could end it now. One pull, one breath, silence delivered. But he stepped closer, his voice cutting deep. "You think a bullet changes anything. It won't bring him back. It won't silence the nights. You'll just carry me instead." Her fingers shook on the trigger. He was right, she hated him for it. Behind her, the private's voice echoed, desperate. "Don't do it. Don't let him take you too." The ghost's eyes stayed locked on hers, cold, waiting, daring. The silence roared in her chest. She thought of her brother, his laugh, his warmth, the way he had lived, not just the way he had died. Her eyes burned, her breath shuddered. And slowly, painfully, she lowered the rifle. The ghost's expression shifted, not surprise, not relief, just something unreadable. He gave her the smallest nod, respect or mockery, she couldn't tell, and then melted back into the desert, disappearing into shadows once more. She sank to her knees, the weight of silence crashing over her. The private reached her, grabbing her shoulders, breathless. Why didn't you?" Her voice broke as she whispered, "Because sometimes silence isn't about revenge. It's about restraint." But even as she said it, her chest still burned. The silence hadn't lifted, not yet. Below them, the fight raged on. The commander's shouts echoed. The men bled. And she knew choices had consequences. Because by sparing the ghost, she hadn't ended the silence. She had changed it. And now it would follow her, heavier than ever. The private held her gaze, eyes wide, torn between admiration and fear. And for the first time, she wondered if the silence she carried would not only haunt her, but him too. What remains when the gunfire fades? The desert was quiet again, not peaceful, never peaceful, just quiet in that heavy way that pressed down on the lungs. She and the private descended the ridge, the fight still echoing below. The men were pulling back, dragging wounded, covering each other with desperate fire. The commander barked orders, his voice hoarse, furious. When he saw her, his fury turned sharp. "Where the hell were you?" She didn't answer. The private opened his mouth, then shut it, his eyes flicking between her and the commander. Whatever he had seen on the ridge, he knew it wasn't his to explain. The commander shook his head, disgust in every line of his face. "You're a liability. After this, you're done. I don't care what you think you're chasing, you're finished." She let the words wash over her. They meant nothing now. The only thing that mattered was what hadn't happened. The ghost still lived. That night camp was tense, brittle as glass. Men sat in silence, nursing wounds, cleaning rifles with empty eyes. The air carried the stench of burned powder, of blood that wouldn't wash off. She sat apart as always, rifle across her lap, eyes on the horizon. But the silence inside her was different now. Heavier, not just grief, not just vengeance, restraint. The private sat beside her quietly. After a long time, he said, "You could have killed him." Her throat tightened. She didn't look at him. "Yes." "Why didn't you?" Her voice cracked like dry stone. "Because if I did, I wouldn't be me anymore." He studied her face, searching. Finally, he nodded slowly. Not agreement, just understanding. The next days bled into each other. Marches across blistering sand, nights under cold stars, skirmishes with shadows. The commander never spoke to her again, except for orders barked like they were meant for a stranger. The men gave her space, not out of respect, out of doubt. Only the private stayed. He followed her gaze when she scanned the ridges. He walked in step with her when the march grew unbearable. He didn't speak much, but his presence said enough. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, painting the desert in bruised light, he asked softly, "Will you ever stop chasing him?" Her chest ached. "No, because he'll always be there. Not out there," she gestured at the horizon, "but here." She tapped her chest. The private's face hardened. He didn't argue, he knew. That night the silence grew heavier. It broke with fire. The ambush came without warning. Explosives tore through the convoy, flipping trucks, hurling men into the air. Gunfire rained from the cliffs, a storm of death. Chaos swallowed the camp. Screams, smoke, shouts, the sickening crack of bullets finding flesh. She dove for cover, rifle up, scanning for angles. The commander was shouting orders, voice drowned by explosions. The private scrambled beside her, firing wild, panic in his eyes. And then she saw him. The ghost. Not a shadow this time, not a fleeting glimpse, but clear, leading the attack from the ridge. His voice carried across the chaos, commanding, cold. Her chest roared, the hum became thunder. She raised her rifle. Time slowed. She thought of her brother, his laugh, his warmth, his face the last time she saw him. And she thought of the private, the way he looked at her, needing her steady gaze to survive. Her finger tightened. But then she saw it, the line of fire not at her, not at the men. At the private. The ghost had him marked. Her chest seized. There was no time for thought. She shoved the private down, rolling over him, her rifle barking a desperate burst. The ghost ducked, his shot cracking harmless into stone. But another found her. The impact slammed into her side, fire ripping through her body. She fell hard, the world tilting, sound blurring. The private's voice screamed her name, raw, terrified. She tried to rise, but her body betrayed her. The rifle slipped from her hands, clattering useless to the sand. Through the blur she saw him one last time, the ghost, standing on the ridge watching her. Their eyes met across the chaos. He didn't fire again. He just watched, and then slowly he turned and vanished into the smoke. The fight dragged on without her. The men rallied, pushed back, bled for ground. The commander roared, the desert shook. But she lay in the sand, her breath shallow, the world narrowing. The private's hands pressed against her wound, frantic. His face was pale, desperate. "Stay with me, please, don't you leave too." Her eyes fluttered. Her chest burned with every ragged breath. She wanted to tell him it was all right. That silence had always been waiting for her. Instead, her lips parted with a whisper. "Don't carry me, carry yourself, live." Tears blurred his eyes. He shook his head violently. "No, no, you're not." Her hand found his wrist, weak but steady. "You'll hear the silence. Every soldier does, but don't let it own you." His face broke, his voice cracked. "I can't do this without you." A faint smile touched her lips, fragile as the wind. "Yes, you can." Her breaths grew shallower. The sky above her blurred, stars beginning to pierce through the smoke. Her last thought was of her brother, his laughter, his warmth, not his death. And then the silence took her. The battle ended hours later. The enemy pulled back. The men gathered their wounded, their dead. The commander never spoke her name. He never admitted what she gave. But the private remembered. Years later, he would still see her face when the silence pressed too hard at night. He would remember her words. And in his quiet moments, when no one was watching, he would whisper them to himself. "Don't let it own you." Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And in the end, her silence spoke louder than any bullet ever could.